I mean, that's a lot of people. And he said, yes, every ordinance that you receive needs to be given to others. One at a time, every single one of them. So, the first sealing of husbands and wives was by Joseph Smith, and it was for both the living and by proxy. So, Brigham Young had a deceased wife, and he was sealed to his living wife and the deceased wife. So the sealing of individuals to each other began. Not just the marriage covenant, but husband to wife, wife to husband. And every ordinance that you see here was at first done outside the temple. So baptisms were done in the river, the endowment was given in the Joseph Smith store, sealings took place in people's homes. And Joseph Smith obviously knew he wasn't going to be around long enough for the temple to be finished. So with that understanding of what was important, he was moving this work along. So March 10th, 1844, he could explain, finally, 21 years later, what the spirit of Elijah meant and what the mission of Elijah was. And he said that we connect ourselves with our fathers, not just on earth, but those who are already in the spirit world. And then he instructed the saints, go and seal on earth your sons and daughters unto yourself, and yourself unto your fathers in eternal glory. Very clear. There was no doubt what he understood about sealing and the importance of families. But he was killed 3 months later. He never had that opportunity. So when Joseph Smith died, this is all they had. They had the power, they had the keys, they had the ordinances. But what was missing? Anyone want to guess?
Just to do it.
Pardon?
The structure.
They had to have people to do it, right? I mean, there were a few that he'd been able to seal. They did a few that he taught the endowment, but he said to Brigham Young, this is going to be different when you do it in the temple. I'm doing the best I can here, but it's on the apostles to take what we understand now and make it happen. So that's what Brigham Young did. After Joseph Smith was killed, they were able to finish the temple. And they finished it in December of 1845. So the baptism font had been there since the 1840s, since 1840. And they just completed the basement to accomplish that. So they built the rest of it. They worked mostly in the attic. But they were able to begin the endowment. About 5,200 were endowed within 6 weeks. That's the only time they had to work in the temple. And you would assume that sealings would have been a critical thing, but there were only a few hundred done. Because what they were trying to accomplish in the temple, the endowment could only be done in the temple. When you're trying to move 300 people through, that's not something you can do in the Joseph Smith store. But the sealings, they thought they could continue outside the temple if they had to. So, how many in the church at that time would have had generations within the church? How many grandparents, parents, and children were in Nauvoo? Not very many. These were first generation. There were many who had come and their families had disowned them. Or women had joined the church and their husbands had not, or had decided it was not for them, or had died. One in a family, Wilford Woodruff's wife, had left her family alone and come. So what do you say to those people? You don't get to be sealed? This isn't for you? Just the lucky ones who have parents who came with them and brought children and now they have grandchildren? So what began was adoptions. Not adoptions biologically, but adoptions spiritually. And it was a concept that Parley P. Pratt had been the first one to write about. But it started with baptism for the dead. So this was another one in my research that was surprising to me, because when you read Joseph Smith's account in Doctrine and Covenants 128, he's talking about the welding link. He's talking about how we're going to link these generations together. And he said, what's the welding link? Baptism for the dead. And I thought, baptism for the dead? First of all, I understand that at that point the sealings hadn't been revealed, but, well, they'd been revealed but not started. But still, I thought, this is not what I understand. So you think of universal salvation. You think of baptism as you are being adopted into the house of Israel. You are being adopted into the kingdom of God. No matter where you come from, no matter what your religious background is, no matter what your genealogy says, you become part of the house of Israel. And the reason that's important is because the promises to the fathers. You want to be an inheritor of the Abrahamic covenant. So you're baptized into the kingdom of God, into the family of God. That's why we call each other brothers and sisters. And for them, that was really adoption. The concept of that was very familiar. So to understand priesthood adoption wasn't a big leap. So you think about it as they did. Joseph Smith received the priesthood from who? Everybody knows this one? Yes? Peter, James, and John the Baptist. And what did that do? It bridged the gap of the apostasy. And whose lineage was Jesus through? David and Abraham. So we all get back to Adam, we're good, right? But priesthood-wise, there's a gap of the apostasy. So to bridge that gap, you have to connect the generations of the priesthood. And that's what they started doing.